Good afternoon, I'm Larry Mullins, and welcome to this very special edition of Black History Month on 1010 Wins. Race 101, what young people think about race relations in America. In the next hour, you will be hearing from college students, black, white, Asian, Muslim, they're all here, sharing their perspectives on the status of race relations in our country. A number of them have come from all types of, and all walks of life, and they're going to share their experiences both at home, in their jobs, and of course at school. Typically, when we talk about race relations, we usually hear from the perspective of 50-somethings, 60-year-olds, 70-year-olds, and typically it deals with Jim Crow laws from back in the day, as we say. And specifically, we hear and we see images of black people being blown away with high-powered fire hoses, German Shepherd dogs chasing after them, protests, fires going and such, as well as, of course, the old back in the day of lynchings and cross burnings. Well, hopefully none of our kids have seen that and will never get to see that. But the big question remains, and that is the overt racism from back in the day. Is it still alive today, perhaps showing up in the face, or at least masked, as institutionalized racism? We're going to find that out in just a moment when we meet our panelists. We have 8 individuals from colleges throughout the tri-state who are coming to visit with us this afternoon. But before we get to them, I want to introduce you to, and I say a young man, I like to say young man to my elders even. I'd like to introduce you to someone who I met several years ago. In fact, we met in this particular forum. We met because we profiled him as a Black History Month honoree, if you will. He is not only a pastor, he is also an historian, he is an activist, and he's an educator. And more than anything else, he's an innovator and a visionary, having established the Abyssinian Baptist Church Economic Development Corporation. That is to help those who are in need, those who would otherwise go voiceless, those who would otherwise go without. Well, today, he's going to serve as my co-moderator, if you will, and he'll also serve as, quite frankly, our daddy, to keep us in check, seeing and drawing parallels. Yes, he's going to be our daddy, to draw parallels with what these kids are about to share with us and to bring us back into the focus. Join me here in this Adorama studio audience as we welcome the Reverend Dr. Calvin Butts. And many of you know Dr. Butts as the president of SUNY Old Westbury. A lot of his kids are here today, and of course the pastor of the great iconic Abyssinian Baptist Church. Thank you so much. It is an honor to see you again. Did you like the young man moniker that I gave you earlier?
I enjoyed that very much.
Doesn't he have a great voice?
It's good to be here.
Doesn't he have that great voice? Doc, I tell you, we've been talking, we talked in the green room a little bit earlier about race relations, and I don't want to put a cliche on it. It's not about you and I. It's about these kids that are going to come up here in a moment. We want to look at where they are and where we are today. But before we get into that, though, can you share your thoughts about where we have come? And I mean, we're not trying to share, and we're not trying to, let me clarify this first and foremost. We know that we're not going to cure all the problems of the world in an hour-long program such as this, but we do want to at least get a dialogue going, because I have a feeling that what we're going to hear from these kids, these students today, is going to go a long way in helping us to redirect the narrative, if you will. Your thoughts, sir, about racism today, where it's been and where we're going?
Racism is not as obvious as the colored white signs that we once saw, for example. It's more amorphic, it's endemic. You really have to be careful because it's out there, but sometimes you don't even recognize it. I saw on a television program last night one talking head say to another, "Don't touch me." And I think the other person didn't realize that their touching of the other was a kind of paternalistic or maternalistic move, as saying, just check yourself. I'm really in charge here, and I know more about this than you do. And it was insulting. And I think it's those kinds of things that people don't often recognize. You mentioned a moment ago lynching. Many of us view the killing, shall we say, of Eric Garner as a lynching. And we see that the person responsible for it has not been punished, much like the killers of Emmett Till. And so racism still exists. I think one of the things I'm very, very anxious to see is how our young people speak about racism and race relations in the 21st century, because I still see it institutionalized, and very insidious and dangerous. And it's also creeping away just from skin color. First of all, there's no such thing as race, but it's creeping away from skin color. And it's beginning to manifest itself in religious discrimination, sexual discrimination, and in many ways that had been kind of maybe downplayed, but now bubbling more to the surface. And the use of terminology, you don't have to use terms that are degrading and dehumanizing any longer. You can smile and be polite and still deny people opportunity and still deny people access. And I think these are the things that we need to look at, for example.
Okay. Dr. Butts, let me ask you with regard to institutional racism. Is it worse? I've heard some people say it is far worse than overt racism in that it's ingrained in the mind. It's something you can't get away with. Or get away from, I should say.
It can be, because you can have someone smiling and complimenting you and not realizing that what they are doing institutionally is really hurting you and stopping you from moving forward. So, for example, you could be an African-American person or a Latino person, and you can be speaking to your boss who may happen to be not necessarily has to be a white person. It could be another Latino person, another African-American person, and they can tell you what a great job you're doing and how much we appreciate you here at this institution. And yet you can hear that and see a person that you know is doing a job that is not quite equal to yours be promoted over you.
Let's see what these young people have to say about it. Please join me as we welcome all of these individuals, and I think there are 8 of them. Come on up forward, guys, and we're glad to have you today. Come on up. They represent colleges throughout the tri-state, and they were chosen because of their outspoken views about racism. Sit anywhere you choose. Welcome, welcome. Look at these hairdos. Boy, I had hair like that once upon a time. Oh, my. Okay, all right, welcome. How is everybody?
Feeling good, feeling good. How you?
Doc, I think we're seeing something already here. Audience, look at what we have here. Look where they all sat. I was prepared and wondering, would they all the black people sit over here and all the white people sit over here? But we have a pretty mixed, diverse group here. And that's interesting. Is that to say that you guys were just too lazy to sit on the other side of the room? Or are we in a situation where it would appear that, at least this lends the appearance, that maybe there's a little hope for us here, that people are mixing it up and it's not a big deal who you sit with? You say what? The lady with the mic. And introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Ika. I'm from Pakistan, and I think that, you know, it doesn't matter who you sit with. I think that we're all human beings at the end of the day, and race, I don't think race exists. That's what I think.
Okay. And someone else, let me hear from you.
So I'm Jonathan Thompson from City College. And same, you don't have to, hello, Principal Wilson.
Shout out here.
And CCNY, all right, so where you sit, same with the LA, it doesn't matter, but it comes down to acknowledging that there are differences between all of us and not letting that be something that stops you from doing something as little as sitting next to a person or engaging with them and being friendly and social, or not engaging with them and dejecting and no, that person has this appearance, or I have this assumption that this person will, you know, behave or conduct themselves in a certain way. You can't let yourself go that far with it. You know, you gotta chill a little bit.
Now, in an ideal world, it would be great if we all thought that way, but that's not the way it is. Where did you get that from?
Where did I get that from?
Where did you get that mindset from?
Well,
and has it always been that way?
Yeah.
Okay, you have always been straight down the middle, no racism, no thought about this kid is white, this kid is black, or anything along those lines.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been like that because I don't see any logic in separating or treating differently, because like I agree, like you shouldn't base your life on a label that doesn't. Just yeah.
Okay.
I was with the you. I've been about that. I mean, do you have anything?
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think that also, I'm Marie. I'm also from City College. City College and CUNY in general is such a diverse system.
Okay.
So it doesn't, like, like I don't register sitting next to people that are different than me.
Okay.
So that didn't strike me as odd, but I don't think I was always that way.
Okay.
My first stint at college was in Atlanta, and I moved from very rural, conservative New Jersey, where I was taught that everyone is equal by my own mother. But when I moved to Atlanta, I noticed that I was unconsciously, interacting with people of color very differently than I interacted with white people.
Okay.
So I definitely think that even if it's not necessarily taught in your home, it was taught to me by my community.
Okay, that's a good thing.
One of the things that comes up every now and then is this reference to how it is, and it makes you think about how it was. And you mentioned City College. Now, City College was an institution, a very elite institution, and very few African Americans who could attend City College. And it took programs like Seek and others to really bring more, not only African Americans, but Latinos into this CUNY system. That was not only true of City, that was also true of Brooklyn, and that was largely true of Queens, all part of the CUNY system. So it's interesting to see that you would make that reference to City and, be very relaxed, if you will, about race. So in your initial question, things have changed, but they've only changed because of intense, and we can take a look at that later, intense struggle by people to demand that we be viewed, all of us, as human beings, rather than by the color of our skin.
Okay, Rayshawn.
Yeah, I'm Rayshawn Agbo from SUNY Old Westbury, and I want to say that thank you. I just want to say that a lot of what it has to do is not a lot of conversation. Like, it takes, I'll say the mortgage and, not mortgage, but housing situations. Well, if you're not around people of different ethnicities, white, Hispanic, Asian, you won't get to know common ground.
Okay.
A lot of things that help with that are sports, integrated schools, because now I'm with my friend here, I can speak to him about what we have in common, whether it be hockey, basketball, sports, politics, business.
Okay.
If we find that common interest, then we can go far together.
So at what point did you realize that about yourself, that you could get along with him? Have you always been that way? I mean, was there any point where, I'll ask all of you this, at what point were you made to realize that, oh, I'm black, I'm not entitled to this, I can't do this? Or white, for that matter.
Well, my mom preached that a lot, being born and raised in the Bronx. She kind of understood, okay, I have to get my kids out of here. Or, I can't raise my kids in this demographics because it's only giving them a sight of only themselves and the people who look like them around them. I have to give them diversity. So we moved out to Elmont, Long Island, and I got to go to Swanica High School, which is a very diverse school. There was Asians, Hispanics, Indians, blacks, and that's when I just knew that, all right, race, it's not a thing.
Okay. Pass the mic to your buddy there. So I have to ask the question, what do you think would happen, if you haven't already, if you show up at the house with Rayshawn and say, Mom, this is my best friend, he's black?
If I come to his house or he comes to my house?
Either way.
Well, my mom, first let me introduce myself. My name is Gracia. And my mom always taught me that everyone is the same, that there's no difference. My mom would invite him in. She would say, "Oh, are you hungry? You want to eat something? Oh, this the bathroom's right here. Are you cold? That's the first thing a Jewish mom says. You want to eat? Are you cold?" So she would treat him the same way as just another person. If I bring one of my white friends or my Spanish friends, anybody, she would treat them the same.
Okay. And let me hear from this side also.
I am Matt. I'm from City College. Growing up for me, it was an interesting experience. I come from a small town of used to be mostly only white Italian Americans until the past 30 years. There was a great deal of Muslim, Turkish, and Koreans who moved into the town. And ever since then, it's just been building up more and more in diversity. And I think something that isn't really valued as much as it should be is when you have diversity of color, when you have diversity of religion, of sexuality, of gender, you also get diversity of thought. And diversity of thought for me is the thing that can change the world. That's something I believe very strongly in. And like I said, small town Italian family, not everybody in my family was very open to other white people, like Irish people, let alone other peoples of color. And my generation specifically, I was a very rebellious youth. So I guess at first maybe there was some inkling of me to rebel and to support the minority groups that other people in my town I felt were either treating poorly. I watched some friends of mine who were Latino get arrested once, and they were not treated the same way when a friend of mine who was white was arrested.
So
same
that.
crime. Yeah, absolutely. Like I do believe in police bias and all those things, but I think that there's something very special about our generation that it's not that we are over-identifying race. I feel it's though we are trying to suppress it, and not by means of ignoring, but by means of normalizing, and that everybody older than us is telling us, no, these people are bad and these people are good. You gotta, and we're just like, no, no, thank you, please. Okay. We'd rather move past that because that's a waste of time.
So any of you care to tell us about your schools with regard to race relations on campus? Dr. Butts, obviously being the president of SUNY Old Westbury, tell me about your schools. So we've gotten past you all being able to get along and what have you, you know, as a group. The schools and the institutions where you go to study, and I bring this up because I can remember, I think it was a few months ago, where students began to protest at one of their colleges because there was a building with a name on it that they did not like, and they felt uncomfortable. They felt a disconnect. I'm black. Why am I going to a school with the leader of the Grand KKK's name who donated a building 100 years ago? Tell us about life on your campus when it comes to finding mentors, when it comes to finding instructors who can relate to you. Anybody, take a shot.
I'll do it. All right. So in my school, I go to Kingsborough. I don't even think race has a factor at all. I don't see anyone there different. Anyone who's there is just a student, and all the professors, any color, any gender, anything, they all treat everybody the same.
Okay, young lady.
My name is Shanique. I go to City College, and I think my school's pretty diverse. Like, you don't really pay attention to, oh, this person is white or this person is Asian, so I'm not gonna sit next to them. Like, we pretty much get along with everyone.
Okay, so now let me push the button. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I actually remember the first class I took with Shanique, and it was, I registered for it as an English class, but it was cross-posted as a Black Studies class. And so
cross-posted as a what?
As a Black Studies class.
Okay.
So I was going into waters that I had...
Hold on. A Black Studies class, and you went to school in Atlanta. Are you black?
Well...
Go ahead.
I don't know.
Go, you don't have to answer
I don't know.
I don't know.
And I remember walking in on the first day of class, and I was one of maybe 2 white students. And although I had gone to school at a school in Atlanta that was almost equally black and white, we were reading, the first reading was on, have you ever walked into a room and felt like you didn't belong there because you were the only person who was black? And I was like, no, but I'm getting a pretty good idea of what that feels like. And it was a big realization that there are a lot of situations where I need to listen instead of speaking, and I was so used to speaking so much in my classes.
You all are very, very rare, these kids that are up here. You're very, very rare.
I think City College is a rare place.
Yeah. Does that speak about New York, a northern institution versus some schools in the South, Doctor?
Not necessarily. What I think it speaks about is the struggle that has brought us to this point. I think programs like this, where we get an opportunity to hear from these men and women, help us to understand that all that has been done in the past to make us see each other more as human beings rather than as belonging to one racial group or the other has actually done some good. That to have young men and women articulate that they do not feel that it's necessary to sit just with their own group, that they would not walk in a classroom and because the person seated next to them is black, wouldn't sit next to them. I think that speaks to the fact that people actually died marching, protesting, dying for their belief that we should all be viewed and judged, as one great American prophet said, by the content of our character rather than the color of our skin. The other thing is, Old Westbury was founded just a little over 50 years ago as a place that was intentional about bringing racial and sexual groups together. And what I mean by that is blacks, women, and older people, really, into an educational setting. So there was an intergenerational theme going on, as well as a racial theme. And the black side of it was viewed in terms of everyone who was not white, so to speak. So Latinos, people who were Asian. It was a broad, people of color.
Okay.
And I think that more and more, as we have these kinds of conversations during Black History Month or at any other time, you're going to find that people are going to express a willingness to embrace each other as human beings. What we need to be concerned about, however, is that this country is not represented well by this group on the stage. Because the country is very divided.
Yeah, they seem to get it.
But they seem to get it. However, it doesn't seem that, and I'll cast myself, that we got it enough to prevent the kind of dangerous shift that we're seeing. I'll give you one example and stop. Coretta Scott King, some 30 years or more ago, 40, wrote a letter to say that Beauregard Jefferson Sessions should not be admitted to the federal bench, I believe it is. And that letter was written because of his posture regarding race. And now we see that he's been confirmed. He is the Attorney General of the United States of America. What happened? How did that come about? So race, even though you're right, somebody said it's not a construct, it's not a social, it is no such thing as race, still plays a very important and often dangerous role in our society. And I think while all of you all are being nice, you know, we've got to say, because if you put a hijab across your head right now, people would hate you. Some people would, right? Okay.
Yeah, on that comment, I forgot the lady's name, but she was silenced while she was speaking. They red carded her, and they said that you cannot use that to basically.
Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, Elizabeth Warren.
So Rayshawn, how did you feel about that? Did that put you in your place as an African American?
No.
I mean, now granted, and let's clarify here, you all seem to get it. You seem to be on one accord. You seem to be diverse. You've accepted that black, white, Muslim, Jewish, whatever, needs to get along well. What happens when you walk outside that door? When you try to get a job, okay? When you try to get married, when you try to date that white lady that you met at school, what is mom gonna say about that? Okay, your thoughts?
My thoughts on, well, I'm trying to integrate throughout life. Well, I'll say don't let the powers that be stop you. The only way that we can break this cycle of hate is to continue to show them that love trumps hate each time, and just continue to integrate with people and speak to people and try to engage in as many conversations and show that not everything is negative when it comes to black, white, Muslim. Show them the light that, all right, just like you said, food, shelter, clothes are the common ground. Sports are the common ground. Conversation, common ground. You just have to continue to keep finding the common ground.
Okay, you wanted to say something?
My name is Raheli David Robinson. I grew up in East Africa, Tanzania. Growing up in East Africa, Tanzania, we have a diverse of Christians and Muslims. So, for instance, one time you'll find like a president who will be a Christian, and we have a vice president who is a Muslim, and it worked fine. So I brought this that kind of thing even when I moved to America, that Christian and Muslim can work together, and seeing that in my country there was no problem, I still feel like there is no difference between Christianity and Muslim. We can all work together, and everything will be fine if we put that we are here as humans and we have to get a job done. Everything is going to be all right if we don't mix the religious.
You are a very unusual case to me. Robinson, isn't your grandfather the famous icon, Robinson?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
So again, my father my father, David Robinson, moved in America 30 years ago, and he started a life in East Africa. So I lived half of my life in Africa, where I kind of knew my foundation and who I am, and really knew my roots. I moved in America like 4 years ago, where now I got introduced to racism, and I knew that my grandfather and my family fought hard to end racism, and my grandfather, we are all proud of him for what he did.
Tell us who your grandfather is. I want you to say it.
My grandfather is Jackie Robinson.
And so it begs the question, with what he went through,
Yes.
and we all know that story, how is it that you were able to break through all of that and not be, I won't say tainted, but for lack of a better word, influenced in a certain direction, seeing what your grandfather, and knowing and learning what your grandfather went through?
He was a very strong person. I believe he had he wanted change. He wanted Black people to be equal. He wanted Black people to be seen as equal. And he had talent, so he was a mirror of Black people, and he broke that through to prove to other people that we as Black people can also work, and we can also be somebody. So that's something that he has shown me and my whole family, and it's something that I personally continue and would love to continue showing other people.
Okay. We're getting words that are coming in on our Facebook Live, and we appreciate that audience that is joining us this afternoon. One says, racism definitely occurs on NYC campus. It's just acted upon passively. Do you agree with that? Any of you agree with that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not willing to say that racism doesn't exist, especially even at CUNY schools, which are so diverse, and I see it. You know, I see student groups on Facebook, and I see blatantly racist, people identifying themselves as alt-right, people actively making anti-Semitic remarks. So I see it. But I feel like it's a very small group, and there's more of us than there are of them. And soon it's going to be all of us and none of them.
Sounds,
well, maybe not soon.
Give her a
but
hand
I
for
think that, I mean, I'm really hoping that the more of us say, that's not okay, that the more of them will hopefully not just be quiet, because that's just as dangerous, but maybe open their eyes. And I think that education is half of it, if not all of it.
Speaking of education, pass the mic to him. I have a quick question. Is there something, and I've heard this in my talks with people prior to this particular program, called stereotype pressure, where because you are, what school are you?
City College.
Okay, where because of your race, okay, that there is this notion, and I saw it when I was coming up in college, that because of my skin color, and I'm in a great school, I didn't get there on my merits because I'm good, because I graduated in the upper class, because I'm good at what I do, and I earned the right to be there. I'm there because of some affirmative action program, or I'm this poor, lowly, downtrodden kid who got in on a program that put me in this college, and therefore I have to produce better than my white counterparts because nobody thinks that I deserve to be there. Have you ever felt that there's a pressure upon you, young Black man, to perform better than everybody else, to prove that you belong there and that somebody didn't just give that to you?
Definitely. Definitely, because, all right, so I'm a biology major, right? So when I say that to people, you can see the look in their eyes where it's like, oh, biology, you're not, you know,
studying music or rap.
It's always music. It's always music.
Yeah.
It's always music or something art related, because, you know, that's, I guess the presumption is that's like all I could do, but like, no, I'm going in. I'm a biology major. I'm about the science. Like, I'm gonna make sure it gets done. And that's the thing. I guess you just have to. You got to work hard to infiltrate all these fields where everyone already assumes that you're not supposed to be there, or you got like an extra leg up trying to get there, you know. But man, it's a little frustrating, because I find myself often like trying to police myself so that people aren't they don't allow the stereotype to like consume their view of me.
Okay.
So like I won't be too loud or something, because, you know, someone's gonna say that's too Black. It's something like that, you know.
But don't you think it's important?
You know, it is. No, so
Well,
now recently.
Don't you think it's important when you see someone who approaches you that way, that you school them, that you educate them, that you inform them, that that approach is tinged with racism? I mean, there's an assumption made about you simply because you're in college and based on not what's in your head or your heart, but based on the color of your skin.
Definitely. I would say in the past it was a lot more, definitely the policing was a lot more intense with myself, but if you don't educate, you're not going to progress. So, and like you were saying before, if you stay quiet, like that's the scary part. When all this stuff grows and manifests and it just builds and builds and builds, and then it's expressed, maybe not so blatantly, but in like a microaggression where someone, you know, that smile in your face, but you know, that dagger in your back. So you have to speak on it. If you don't, then that's, you're contributing to the problem. So I would say now, you know, I'm louder than ever. I say everything that's on my mind, and I make sure that I'm fully representing myself as me, so that it's not, oh, okay, he's a black guy that's like this, he's a guy. Okay. Like, you know, he is who he is, and he's getting it done.
He's a black guy who happens to know what he's doing.
Yeah, all the time.
Okay. Pass the mic to him, and while he does that, audience, you are welcome to take that mic over there if you guys have questions or something that you want to share. I see a couple of people getting a little fidgety there, wanting to make a comment. Let me ask you, there is one thing that keeps coming up also, and we're trying to move it along here. We have heard of white privilege. We've all heard of that, right? Let me see hands. White privilege. Well, now there's a little something that's been coming up lately called black privilege.
Oh, please.
Uh-huh. Now. So then the question becomes, and black privilege, let me explain that which at least I've learned and have read and have heard from people, and that is black people who are benefiting so much from the system that whites feel as though they have no voice, they have no role. And I think more than anything, yeah, that's what we're hearing. And then more than anything, the concern is that because of that, black people basically are given an opportunity to be racist because of black privilege, and whites cannot. Your thoughts?
I started off right when Black Lives Matter came out, hashtagged it all over my Facebook. I was all in support of it. Blue Lives came out, and I thought it was ridiculous because you're not born blue. That is not a thing. One thing that does bother me, though, with the growing influence of Black Lives Matter, I feel that now in our times we are watching a few of their leaders be arrested, or we are seeing the money that is donated to them not be recycled back into the communities like Flint, Michigan, which is predominantly black and continuously poisoned by the inactivity of the United States government, whatever you want to call it. It's almost serving as a way of keeping black people out of law enforcement, which is terribly dangerous because we go back to the days when black people were not in law enforcement and it was a racial bashing party, and that's incredibly dangerous. I feel now with this new administration, it is important to get young black Americans into the Justice Department so they can make the changes internally. And white allies also. I'm not saying it's just their job alone, but it's everybody's job, but I feel this new avenue is something that could make such great strides for the black community, and I think supporting that from the ground up is more important than you have to be on the All Lives Matter, you have to be on the Black Lives Matter, you have to be on the Blue Lives, like that All Lives Matter or No Lives Matter. Like, I want everybody to get past the trigger words on both sides, white people, black people, whatever it is.
So how do we get past those trigger words?
Talking about it.
What do we do?
Talking about it. There can be people who are racist who say not racist things. There can be not racist people who say racist things. And if we treat them both one and the same, we have that chance of making that person no longer want to contribute to the conversation, and then they just keep all them things to themselves, and that just spirals, and we know what happens when we don't talk about things. They just get larger and larger.
Do you think these students should have maybe applied for the cabinet because they sound like well,
it's interesting that I think the consideration has to be that, yes, there ought to be more people of color on the police departments. across the board in this nation, particularly in a city like New York. And there have been efforts, concerted efforts, to keep people of color off of the police force, out of the fire department. There have been some who've been working against it, but there is racism. There it is. Whether it's in psychological exams, whether it's in recruiting, whether it's in however you want to characterize it. Also, when you talk about educational institutions, City College, Old Westbury, the question is not only to ask how many students of color, it is also to ask how many administrators of color and how many particularly faculty of color. Now, and particularly in the areas where you are, or in any of the areas, this also speaks to, for Jewish people, there used to be a quota. You know, you couldn't have but so many Jews on a faculty, if any at all. And so it is important to press to make sure that we are on cabinets. One of the criticisms of not this current president, but the one just before him, was that there were not many people of color on his cabinet. Interesting how racism manifests itself. And black people are not in a power position to really be racist. I mean, we can't inflict any punishment. We can't stop mortgages, the mortgage crisis from happening. We're not the leaders of these banks and institutions. We can find one or two here or there. So you must always remember when discussing racism to consider the power perspective on this and how power acts, you know, in this way. And Tanzania, as well as all of Eastern, much of Southern Africa, the colonial powers that once oppressed, you know, you had a brilliant leader in Nyeri, but that once oppressed Africa and the resources they pulled out, you know, an expression of gross, intense, the Congo, Belgium, racism and hatred. And it was constructed so as to exploit. And I think that all of us need to recognize that poor people, white and black, are catching hell. See, you have to go to where poor white people live.
So it's an us thing.
Oh, poor white people catching hell. And the only thing that keeps poor white people from uniting with poor black people is the false construct of race. 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 I mean, poor white farmers in rural Georgia are catching the same hell. Their families are broken. Their children are having children out of wedlock. They are drunk. Look at the opioid epidemic. Didn't we try to say to the whole world that heroin was killing us and turned a blind eye and millions of people died? And now, here it is. Chickens coming home to roost, if you will. So I think that this is wonderful in terms of this discussion. Yeah. But look at the people whose nations, Iraq, Iran, the Palestinians, you know, Muhammad said it best about Vietnam. These are all people of color. Yeah. Yeah. And they're feeding into a system that is predominantly white. How do we express that? And when you begin to dig into that, then I think the sister, whoever wrote that, Fatima, I think, passive, you know, we talk nicely about each other, but there's something seething just beneath the surface. Yeah. That's very dangerous.
Yeah. I have to ask a question. Even the reason that we're here today to talk in terms of Black History Month and general talk that, you know, what would happen if there were a White History Month? Is it fair for an Asian History Month? Why do black people have a History Month? Why is that necessary? Have you ever been confronted with that?
Yeah, but I feel like...
And does it make you feel uncomfortable, Black History Month? You're walking around and people are looking at you, again, back to that black privilege thing.
I feel like Black History Month shouldn't be a thing because Black History Month is American history. Like, America wouldn't be what it is today if it wasn't for Black people being slaves and working their asses off to get this country to where it is now. As for Black privilege, what is that? Like, you can't say, oh, you know, Black people, we abuse the system because more white people abuse the system. If we're talking about welfare and Section 8, there's more white people on it than there are Black people. It's just that because I think Black people had just had this this really bad reputation well, it's not really our fault that we're poor anyway, and we need these assistants, you know? And it's like, you can't say that we abuse the system. We didn't create the system.
Okay, so, but let me ask you though, and people are writing in about it, where is Black privilege? We're getting it on Facebook Live. Would you say that you do benefit from some things because of the color of your skin?
I don't.
Can you think of anything that you benefit from?
Financially.
An NAACP.
I don't get sunburned.
Financial aid, that's about it.
I don't get sunburned as easily. I do get sunburned, but not as easily.
You get to join the NAACP. You get to take part in Black Pride Week. You get to take part in so and so and so and so that your white counterparts do not. Your thoughts? Are you privileged to a certain extent?
I'm grateful that there are these foundations and organizations that exist to make sure that Black people are empowered and that you know, we're acknowledged and recognized. But the reason that these organizations are around is because Black people were teared down from the get-go. So we wouldn't need these organizations if it wasn't like the agenda to strip everything that was Black, and not to mention that Black was created. I'm going to go back to you talking about colonialism for a second. Just start from there because you're drawing parallels. It goes from colonialism to right now. So we could talk about how Africans are enslaved, brought to America. That happens. That's generational. You have nothing. You're not able to build economically. You're not able to build socially. You're not able to build in any way whatsoever. So after slavery ends and everybody's free and it's okay, then you have convict leasing and you have all these things that further the tearing away, tearing apart of Black people in America. So when you have Black privilege, I have a privilege that my history's been erased. I have a privilege that I can't track where I'm from. That's not a privilege to me. I mean, we got to check what the definition of privilege is because that just doesn't work. So there's no privilege in generational destruction of a people. Simply, maybe it's an insecurity that it started. I don't know what it's about. I mean, we know what they did to people after they lynched them. They cut something off, and I don't know if that's what it's about. But what? That is not
it's coming.
Thing.
It's coming.
That is not a thing.
What about you? And I'm reading here, white history is taught to us for 12 years. We celebrate Columbus, the main person responsible for the extinction of native inhabitants in this country, is what we're reading on Facebook Live. But it brings me to, again, that question, should there be a Jewish History Month?
Oh, I feel
Give him the mic. Well, either one of you. Oh, you're going to speak for him now.
Well, I don't really know if there should be a Jewish History Month. I mean, we look back and we see all the terrible things that happened during the Holocaust, but now that we move past it, we still know that the racism is there, but just knowing that is there is, in my opinion, that's enough. That's enough for me. There doesn't have to be like, a month dedicated to, Jews suffered terrible things. I think just being aware of it and trying to move past it is just enough.
Okay.
You think of the suppression of Black people's history. That's why Black History Day, Black History Week, emerged. Because there was never that's why the Black colleges emerged. There was never an opportunity for us to really tell our story, to learn who we are, to become aware of self. And so it grew up, but Black History Month, once again, just like we shall overcome, just like the civil rights struggle morphed into the human rights struggle, led the way for so many other oppressed people. That's why white history was more a history of, if you will, the history we had to learn, of the continuing of imperialism and colonialism and the greatness of Europe, et cetera, et cetera. But here we are saying, wait a minute, hold it. So when the civil rights marches, for an example, marched around the walls of segregation and discrimination and bigotry, and the walls came tumbling down. Who ran across the rubble? Black people, white women, Jewish persons, Latinos, all oppressed groups. That's why we were at the vanguard of the struggle. So Black history is essential when talking about people of color, you know, and the great, my brother mentioned earlier, athletics, Muhammad Ali. He said, no Vietnamese ever called me a nigger. And it made the world focus on what was the struggle there, you know. So when we take a look at Muslims now coming, you know, and people from the Middle East, and we begin to talk about Jewish history. Now, Jewish history is an interesting thing because how does that reflect on the struggle now between the nation of Israel and the Palestinians? And so Black history is a way to bring into focus all of the big issues of our day, all of the big issues. So we celebrate Black history because it encompasses so much. It encompasses people of color who make up, we're not the minority, who make up the majority of people in the world. And so reflection and thought and conversation has brought all of us together. This is why we should applaud education. This is why, and one of the best places to get an education, you know, I love you people from CUNY, that's a good school, but the State University of New York.
Here we go, here we go. Okay, you brought it up, and you all have mentioned the word, the N-word. We hear it used on the trains and the subways here in the city as a term of endearment. You know, my nigga this, you my nigga, you this, you that, or whatever. You've heard it, okay? And I've always thought to myself while riding on a train, I bet you if that white kid called you that name, you would lose your doggone mind. Your thoughts, ma'am, about the idea, and you're on a train. I'm gonna put you on that train right now. And there are these young brothers there going, oh man, my nigga, man, he's my guy, he's my dude. Your thoughts? Make you uncomfortable?
It makes, the word itself makes me uncomfortable.
Can you say it?
No, and I never have.
Can you say it the way they say it?
Definitely not.
Does it bother you then?
I mean, it doesn't bother me when I see my peers and people of color using it because it's not really my place to police their language and what they make of it. But I'll never forget the first time I heard it, and I was 12. And it was horrifying because it was family using it casually to refer to one of my cousin's boyfriends. And they were like, oh, he knows he's a... And I was like, you don't say that to people. Like, it's like, you know, you just,
See,
it's like there's things you just don't say.
That's why they sent you to Atlanta.
And this was in Virginia. But it does make me uncomfortable. And I don't know why.
Yeah. Somebody else over here, different, you're on a train and your buddies are there and one of your homeboys or whatever, and they're, oh man, you know, so-and-so and so-and-so and so. Could you use it? Could you even jump into that conversation and have the conversation with them?
I don't think I would be able to jump into their conversation, but I don't feel uncomfortable using the word just because of where I grew up. I grew up in Brooklyn, so my school was mostly half white, half black, and I was cool with everyone. So when I saw black kids referring to each other at that term, I've seen it since elementary school. Black kids always referring to themselves with that word. So it never struck me as a bad thing. Although once in a while people tell me, like, you know, that word, like older people, they tell me, you know, that's not a nice thing to say. And I think about it, I'm like, yeah, you know, actually it's not. But based on where I grew up, and I don't feel uncomfortable using it, even though it is, if you look back on the history, it is not a good thing to say.
What's weird, Doc, he doesn't know it yet, and maybe he does. I've heard white kids referred to by their friends as such.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. I think it's a casual use of a very negative and harmful term that has been embraced not only by too many people of African descent, but is now being commonly used by Latinos, whites, everybody. And I think we have to be careful. Words do hurt. And I would never call a Jewish person a derogatory name. I mean, there's several. Or an Italian person, a derogatory name, and there's several. Or an Irish person, a derogatory term.
I didn't even know there were derogatory terms for Irish people.
Sure they are.
I missed that one.
And
Good.
we have to be very careful, because our casual use among it says that we continue the dehumanization. So when a person of African descent says it's a term of endearment, oh no, it's not. Oh no, I know what they mean when they try to say that. But you have to be very careful with language. The other thing is, just to point this out, bring up another subject, Ossie Davis, the great actor and activist, wrote a little essay on the use of the term black as opposed to white. And in that essay, he characterizes how many negative connotations are attached to the word black. And that's another way of continuing the kind of racist thinking and behavior that is so prevalent, I would continue, in our society today. So the use of that N-word is dangerous. It's dangerous if it's used by anybody. And I condemn it the same way that I condemn the use of the B word when referring to a woman. Mm-hmm. And other women refer to each other that way. Oh, no, 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 no. That continues a dehumanization of women across the board. Black women, of course, in particular in terms of my own concern. But we have to be careful, because those who sit in high places and foster that kind of behavior just laugh all the way to the bank.
Yeah. Young lady, we have someone in the audience here who wants to speak. Speak right up.
Hi, my name is Megan. I'm a student at SUNY Old Westbury. And I'm glad you brought that up with the N-word, because I was actually thinking about that. And a friend of mine, we're talking, he's on the phone, he's black, Asian and Italian, but grown up predominantly white. And he said the word, just telling a story, and then I was repeating it back to him, asking him a question, and I said it. And he took it so much offense, and we've known each other for years. And I was like, but you know me, you know I'm not racist, you know I'm not like that. And I just think that word should be completely done away with, because it causes fights, it causes arguments unnecessarily if it's used the wrong way. What do you guys think about that? Is that something that you think is okay to keep being used?
I personally do not.
I don't either.
I will tell you this, you hear it particularly in older generations where, again, it has been used as a term of endearment. I've had white friends refer to me as such back in the day. I don't allow it now, you know, and we correct each other or whatever. But nonetheless, this new generation and this, what I'm seeing here is a movement of people who seem to be on the same page with regard to use of the N-word and coming together in solidarity and coming together as people marching in the streets saying to, you know, new administrations or whatever. I won't go there with regard to politics, but you get what I'm saying. My point is this. It's going to take you all to come together and spread this word that you all seem to be a party to and seem to embrace. I mean, would you agree? I mean, is that the next move?
I agree
and how will that happen? How do we take this out of this room, okay, and take it into the marketplace where we have more people like you, and you, and you, and you, and Muslim even?
I agree with freedom of speech. You're going to say the word. You can't censor anybody from saying any word, whether it be the B word, the F word, the S word, when it comes to Spanish people, or even the N word. Just be aware of how you use it and who you use it with.
Wait a minute. Hold on a moment. Be aware of how you use the N-word, yes, and who you use it with?
Yes, because if you use it out of context, when it comes to, I know you said that if you're with your friends, you're using it as, I'll say, a regular word, as a term of endearment, and that's who you're comfortable with. Whether it be women saying the B word to each other, whether it be people joking around, just make sure it doesn't go past that. When you're trying to hurt somebody with the word, that's when it gets bad.
You heard the man. He said when used in the proper context. Okay? If I gave you the proper context to call me a Negro, okay, and I'm putting it nicely, could you use it comfortably in the right context?
I think that's up to the individual. For me personally, absolutely not. What he was saying about growing up in Brooklyn, I think that the one thing that we're not addressing, which is probably at the forefront of our race issue, is a class issue. And we look at where the economy is now. Everybody, across the board, unemployment is up, food stamp usage is up, EBT is, everything is a little out of control. And it's not just the black people, like we're like the alt-right or whomever is saying it. It's everybody at the bottom, the people who do not have the wealth, who do not have the means to generate the wealth, and we've entrapped that community.
So it's not a black-white thing. It's a them versus us. It's a poor versus rich.
Black and white is definitely involved. I think it is definitely a real issue. It is a very real thing amongst us, the middle and lower classes, I guess, whatever you want to call us. But I feel as though the media sometimes uses race, religion, and the other divisive factors to keep us at each other's throats, so we don't realize that these directions are coming from the top.
So subterfuge.
Well,
a little.
He's right. I mean, black and white, that issue is used to divide people. And there's a reality in saying that poor people have to be united in order to crumble the empire. I mean, poor people are being exploited terribly. And people who begin to, Martin Luther King Jr. is a primary example. Martin Luther King Jr. raised the civil rights issue. It was clearly a black-white issue. But the more he marched and the more he thought and the more he had conversations with others, Jewish, white, across the board, the more he realized it was a class issue. And remember now, he was not killed for his racial views or speaking about black and white issues. He was killed as a result of his Poor People's Campaign, where he was leading poor whites and poor blacks to Washington, D.C. to demand equity in this system. That's when he got killed. And I think it's important for us to remember, and I think it's a very good point. You can't negate race because race is used. No matter how poor you are in some places, as a white person, you're always considered better than that black person. And that keeps us from coming together to topple. Martin King spoke against the war in Vietnam and the resources that were pouring out of this country that could have been put into schools, into hospitals, into all kinds of things that would elevate human beings. And when he got to that point, he was assassinated. So I'm saying to us, be careful. This discussion about race is extremely important, but it is not as important as the discussion about class. And I think that we can come together, but you have to realize that even people who are privileged, well-educated, smiling, will say, "Oh, I do not dislike Negroes, and I think they're fine people."
Or colored people.
You know, but at the same time, they are the same people who are benefiting from the exploitation of poor people in places in Africa, in places in the Middle East, where resources and oil and other things are being taken. And while they say, "Oh, I do not dislike people of color," but at the same time, they're benefiting from the exploitation of people of color.
Okay. Young man.
Yes, good afternoon, first of all. Thank you for having this panel. My name is Carrington Amy. I'm from Brooklyn College. I actually came up to speak about the N-word at first, but then we evolved into the classism and the economics of this whole structural racism. I would like to add that, again, I think that classism is the new focus of what the civil rights struggle should be. Granted that classism is covered in black and white, though. When you think about high class, upper class, lower class, you immediately assign a race and identity to who's above and who's below. Unfortunately, though, of course, we have the negative connotation within our community. I think that the next step really would be a restructure of how we community build. I think we have to invest in ourselves and invest in our youths, particularly. Again, young people, I feel like the generation before us, they had the harder struggle. They had to recognize how to stick together, how to achieve that blackness. I think the structures and the way society set up and moved forward, they saw we was getting too focused on self, how we started to invest in our community, invest in our own education, invest in how we're going to move forward as a unit. They started seeing that. And instead of us continuing that legacy, they made it a little bit so like every so often you see somebody that made it. you see somebody that made it, right? So think about it like our idols. You might see like a rapper, like younger people, they'll see a rapper that made it. It's just him that made it though, but it means I have a shot to do it. All I gotta do is focus on my craft, not on our craft or our self of uplift. I think that if we start restructuring that thought process, restructuring how we even build a community, like people have taken away the meaning of being together. Honestly.
Okay.
Everybody fights for self.
Okay.
We need to bring that back.
Let's begin to wrap. To wrap this up, we're getting close to our time here. And since you started it, let me hear around the room, each one of you, where do we move forward? How do we fix this? How do we get to a point where everybody is on the same page, or at least moving in the direction of what the thoughts are here of the people on this stage? You, sir.
I think one of the most important things to acknowledge is what you just said. We have to work on like positive community building. We have to get to know our neighbors beyond just, okay, hi, how you doing? Okay, bye. Like you have to build those good connections with everybody, and you got to focus on education where, you know, you're teaching the history of America, but you're not teaching the Black history of America. You're not teaching any kind of history associated with people of color in America. Like, and you have to do that. And you also have to tackle like hierarchy. You have to, we understand that it's race, class, and gender. So just being myself, I have to understand I have a privilege of being a male because there's wage inequalities and things like that. But I've surpassed that part of the three levels of it, you know. So now I'm on class. Like we're saying, class is the real issue. You have to focus on that. We got to make sure that we're aware of all these things and then move forward.
Okay, next.
I think that the start, again, is with education. It's pushing ourselves outside our comfort zones, examining that white privilege, because I don't think this Black privilege is a thing or shouldn't be even thought of, because it can't exist. And being willing to look at yourself and say, hey, in what ways is my white privilege, even unconsciously, affecting the way I interact with the world? What am I doing? How can I look at myself? And being willing to talk about it and not take offense and get angry, but rather say, oh, hey, you know, can you check me when I do these things that are perhaps subtle or passive aggressive? And
can a person in his 50s, 60s, or 70s do that? Is that the problem? Are we the problem?
I don't think you're the problem. I mean, yeah, I think that people, my mom's age are perhaps unwilling to make a change that significant because it's not easy and it's not fun, it's not comfortable. But if we want to see a different America than we have now, we have to be willing to talk about uncomfortable things. Okay. And we have to be willing to do it without getting upset.
All right, next.
Sorry, what was the prompt?
Where do we go from here? Okay. How do we fix this? How do we get people in the mindset that you're in and all of the folks here are in with regard to race relations?
In regard to race relations, and
classism and all the other isms. Yes.
I think it's empowerment. It's always going to be empowerment. There are the last real throes of classic American racism, slave trade racism, still happen today. I believe I watched Jeff Sessions' confirmation hearing, and Dianne Feinberg, her opening statement to Mr. Sessions was addressing the human trafficking issue in the United States and across the world because it's exploding all over. And the most common color of person exploited is the Black person. And I'm not saying African American because they're, or whoever these people are, it's in Haiti. I believe just a few days ago in Ghana at Lake Volta, there was another ring that was busted from this. So it's empowerment, it's education, it's finding that there are different ways to help support and bolster the Black community, the poor community, the immigrant community. So it's great.
Ms. Robinson.
Personally, I think changes begin with us. I say this, I ride a train every day, actually. And sometimes when I'm in the train, I see these young, talented boys. They do choreography and everything. Every end of their statement, they say that, oh, we are here dancing, collecting money. This is good. Instead of doing this, maybe we would have been in jail. This is sad because I feel like a 17-year-old kid to have two options for themselves, that either dancing in the train or they would have been in jail. That is something that I feel like we as Black people, or we as Black mothers, and we put this in their mind that you have two options, trying the train or still, if not that, you would have been in jail. So if parents try to teach their kids and tell them that you're better than dancing in the train, you can be anything, you don't have to think of jail. As a Black person, you don't even have to think about that.
Okay.
So that's one thing we should think about.
Okay, pass the mic, and let me ask all of you to be brief in your comments here on out. We have just a few more minutes left in the program, and we need to wrap. Go ahead.
I feel like
I didn't want to skip over you, but go ahead, and then you pass to her, and then we'll go back real quick.
for us to be able to build a community, I think it starts within the home. Like, there's too many broken homes and single parents and not having help from, you know, the person who they had this child with to actually raise that child and show them what's right and what's wrong. So I think we need to start there first.
Okay.
And then once we get these kids really into the world and they start going to high school and college, we have to teach them how to accept everyone else.
Okay.
And to, like, let go of those stereotypes that we have of Black people and white people, and understand that we're all humans, and we actually have to, we live on this planet together, so we have to figure out how to work with each other.
Okay. Pass it to her.
As a Muslim woman, I think that, well, when you think of Islam and when you hear of a Muslim woman or man, most people associate that with terrorism and 9/11. You know, as a Muslim woman, I'm not a terrorist. I'm a human being, and I think in order to move forward, I think that we should, like, not separate people based on religion or race, but, you know, accept people for who they are, and, you know, just communication and education, which was also said multiple times. That's how we move forward from this.
Okay. Next.
I think the main thing to look at when we're talking about moving forward is, speaking of us as the new generation, is when we become the parents. When all of us sitting in this room, when we become the parents and we have to educate our children, I think that is when the huge change is going to become. Because I look at myself, and I don't think if my mother didn't teach me to not be racist, then I probably would be.
Okay. So.
I feel like the change comes with the seats in the Supreme Court, Senate, and a lot in government. We have to get people of all colors, Blacks, Spanish, and Muslim in there to afflict change, because laws are the things that are slowing us up right now from changing things from schools, getting them more integrated, as well as communities, getting them more integrated. I think it starts with the communities first, because once the communities are integrated, then it's not a first time seeing somebody of a different race once you get to college or once you get to the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
You have to do that from early,
From the ground
preschool,
up, yeah.
kindergarten, elementary school. It has to start there.
All right. Dr. Butts, final word, sir. I'll give you the last word.
I'm delighted to be a part of this discussion. I am a proud person of African descent. I can define who I am as in the construct of this society as a Black man, and I'm proud of it. I know what I've contributed. But I also want to say to all of us who are here and all of us listening, this conversation with Brother Mullins would not have happened unless there was a Black History Month.
Makes sense. With that said, I will tell you young people this. I am very surprised at what I heard here today. I did not know, and we came into it raw. We didn't set this up. We didn't stage it one way or the other, anticipating that there might be pushback between a few of you. We came into this figuring that maybe there would be differences of opinion. I think for the most part, we did not see that here today, and I'm actually encouraged to know that maybe there is hope for us seeing you guys. Would you guys in the audience agree? Yeah, maybe there is hope for us. My hope is that you will leave here and teach, as you mentioned, to your kids and to your peers and to your friends, the same things that you've shared with us here today. Again, we weren't trying to change the rules of the world in one hour program here today, but I think with what you all have shared, I feel like walking out of here and singing praises to the whole city, figuring that if we could all get on one page like this, I think we'll be okay. Take that with you. Take that with you in whatever you do. I like to toss around the N-word too. My N-word is necessary. You know, if you can be nothing else, be necessary and take it out there with you. And again, I thank you all, every single one of you. Give them a hand for showing up and being brave enough to stand up today. With that said, I want to thank our friends on Facebook Live who have joined us this afternoon, those of you who have been viewing us online, on Facebook and in other means and by other means. This has been this is a very eye-opening program in that it again shares with us the fact that apparently somebody's reaching these kids, somebody's reaching the new generation. And I think it's going to take that. I think we all believe that it's going to take just that and what we've heard here today to make the world a much better place. With that said, I'm Larry Mullins for Black History Month on 1010 Wins, and all of our executive producers, Sharon Barnes-Waters, Ben Meverak, and Ivan Lee. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, and I'll catch you on the radio. Good afternoon.